How's it going, guys? Welcome to another HackerRank video. Today we're going to solve the simple array sum problem. I'll link the problem in the description, so go ahead and check it out and try to solve it before you continue watching this video. So let's quickly read the problem. I'm not going to read everything, but let's just look at the problem. Given an array of n integers, can you find the sum of its elements? So it looks like this is a sample size. The first number is how many numbers are being given to us, and then this is the input, essentially the string of integers. So if you notice, all inputs, and I didn't really mention this in my first video, but generally for HackerRank, inputs come in as like a file, a text file, and then each line is being read one at a time. And they're basically, when you originally bring them in, they'll be strings. So you need to convert them into like integers, or convert them into arrays, or make your own data structures essentially. But yeah, so it looks like you take this and then you have to return a sample output, which is the sum of all the numbers in the array. So let's quickly look at this, the actual program where we could solve it. As I mentioned, you don't really need to worry about these parts up below, because it's all about just bringing in the input for you to process. If you look down here really quickly, you'll notice this like split function. And if you have gone through my JavaScript series where I go over all the common methods, you'll know that split takes a string and then splits it based on a certain character, and it's looking for the space right here. And if you notice up here, there's spaces right here. So it's basically saying, hey, look for those spaces and then create an array for basically every time you see those space, create a new index into that array. And that's why this becomes an array. And then right here, it's changing that string into a number. And then right here, it's basically saying, call this function that we're going to be writing, which is right here, the simple array sum. And now all you need to worry about is that we have this integer n that's coming in, this number, and an array that's coming in with all the numbers inside of it. Before we actually solve the problem, let's talk through a few examples. Right off the bat, I could think of a few ways to solve this problem. Because it gives us the value n, maybe we can iterate based on the number. We could create some kind of for loop or while loop where we go through each of the array and then we add up each of the numbers to some temporary variable. So it would look something like var temp equals 0, and then we could say for I equals 0, I is less than n, and then I plus plus, and then we could say array temp plus equals array I. So something like that. I think that should probably return, and if we return the temp, let's give that a try. And it looks like it works. So that's one way to solve it, but I'm going to briefly go over some things to think about when you're programming and solving problems. I'm going to make an entire video based on this, but it's called Big O notation. Big O notation is just a way to think about how your code is running, to think about the efficiency of your code. These are all high concepts, but there's something called space complexity and then runtime complexity. So runtime is, if you look right here, this for loop, this for n inputs, for a given n input, this for loop needs to run at least once, right? But let's say that in here, for whatever reason, I made another for loop, like so. Plus. Let's say I just did something like that, right? Do something. Now, if you look in here, now there's a nested loop, right? So for every n input, now my function needs to run double that time. So that big O notation becomes n squared. And for space complexity, it's the same thing, but it's for how much extra memory are you creating. So space is regarding to memory, and then runtime is regarding to how many times do you need to loop over something or iterate over something, and how long will that take to finish, right? So I'm just briefly going over this, but I'm going to make a full video about Big O notation, and I'll retroactively put that link here. But yeah, it's because it's a super important concept, and it's one of the main things that people will kind of like ask you about when you're doing interviews. Also, it's super useful for you when you're programming, because sometimes you're going to be working on a problem or working on some kind of feature and it's super slow for some reason. You're not sure exactly why it's so slow. But if you know about big O notations, you could analyze your code and then you could adjust your code to take up less space or take up less memory, you know, optimize your code, things of that nature. And it's a very crucial skill to have as a software engineer. I'll leave that topic for now. Just understand that big O notation exists. But let's kind of move on back to this problem. So we already solved this with like an imperative way by iterating over the array. So the way I would solve this problem actually is just using a built-in array function. If you guys haven't seen my higher order functions video, you should I'll link it below and you guys could watch it. But you could do array dot, and then here's some of the methods. It looks like all the methods, but we could use reduce. So go through here and then we name it function. I'm not going to use an arrow function just yet until I go over it. And here, so you pass in a callback, you know, a higher order function. So here we could say A and then B. And then we do return A plus B. And that's essentially what, and when you return this entire thing, this is like a declarative way of programming. And when you do this, it should pass the same test case, right? So all reduce does, quickly going over it, it takes the current number and the previous number and adds it back and then passes it to the next array recursively. Not array, next index essentially. And then at the end, it like reduces everything down to one number and then returns it back. So this is pretty much saying, oh, take the previous item, add it to the current item, and then return. And then it's just doing that over and over until there's no more items in the array. So that's what reduce is. And this is kind of a declarative / functional way of programming. If you noticed before, we did this kind of looping over things where we define how the exact steps should be, how it should be iterated over. And this is just a one-line solution. There's pros and cons to both. I hope you guys can figure out what the pros of doing it imperatively versus like declaratively. So, but yeah, that's pretty much it. Let's go ahead and submit this code. It's in the queue. We're waiting. And there you go, we have solved this problem, and that was a simple array sum problem. And I hope you guys enjoyed this particular challenge. It was a little bit longer than I wanted it to be. I'm trying to make these really quick, so something that you could consume just like while you're on the train or something, just to get your programming juices flowing, right? So, but yeah, that was the simple array sum problem. I hope you guys enjoy it, and I'll see you guys on the next challenge. Bye.